A chord substitution is when you take one chord in a piece and replace it with another to create a different sound. Well, how does it work and what are the different types? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Okay, the most basic chord substitutions involve replacing a chord with another that share two common tones. So obviously that just means two notes that they have in common. For example, you can substitute a D minor chord for an F major chord since they have two common tones, F and A. So let me show you on the piano and on the sheet music here. So as I said, you can replace an F major chord made up of the notes F, A, and C with a D minor chord made up of the notes D, F, and A. And that's because they have a crossover of two notes in common, F and A. So say we have our sheet music here. We actually have an F major chord written right here. And let me turn this into a half note so we can draw another chord next to it. So I can replace that F major with a D minor, and on the paper it looks like this. And let me drag it over. So you can actually see that there are two notes in common. I mean, you could visualize it on the piano, but this is what it looks like on the sheet music. And that's the general way you want to go about it. There's some different things you want to keep in mind, though, when doing chord substitutions, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Let's do another example. So let's do another example. So say I had a, I don't know, maybe a G major chord. Well, what chord could I replace that with? It has to have two notes in common. Well, if you want a simple trick on how to find a chord that you can replace it with, an easy thing to do is just take the chord that you have, take the bottom note, and move two notes down and build a chord on that. Now, you have to pay attention to things like key signatures in that, but if we're in the key of G, there's only one sharp, F sharp, which, you know, none of these notes are, so we don't have to worry about it. So we have E, G, and B, so an E minor chord can replace a G major chord. Also, if you do the trick in the opposite direction, or actually if you start on the middle note and stack two evenly up there, that gives you another chord that you can replace it with. So you can replace a G major chord also with a B diminished chord, which we'll talk about, because that's a specific type. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so now that you get the concept that you can replace any two chords so long as they share two common tones, let's talk about the different common types of chord substitutions there are. These include the 2-5 substitution, the 7 diminished to 1 substitution, the tonic substitution, and the tritone substitution. Let's take a look at the 2-5 substitution. Okay, so here we have a standard 1-4-5-1 progression. All that means is that our first chord is built on the first note of the scale. The fourth chord is built on the fourth note of the scale. The 5 is built on the fifth note of the scale, and then you go back to the 1 chord in C major. All right, so let me write these out. So you got 1, oops. So you got 1. Let me draw that a little bit better. You got 1. You got 4. These are all written out in Roman numerals, by the way. A capital Roman numeral indicates a major chord, and a lowercase Roman numeral indicates a minor. So these are all major chords. So you have C major, F major, G major, back to C major. So the 2-5 progression substitution basically means that we have 5 right here, right? So basically what that means is that in place of this 4, we're going to put a 2 chord, which, hey, is lowercase, so that's actually going to turn into a minor chord. And so we're going from an F major chord, and we're replacing it with the 2 in that key. So we're replacing it with the 2 in that key, as you can see, is D minor. Well, hey, didn't I mention right in the beginning you could replace F major with D minor? Why? because they have two notes in common. So this creates a 1 2 5 1 progression, which is why it's called the 2-5 substitution. Okay, so next we're going to talk about it looks pretty odd, right? A 7, and it has a circle that indicates diminished. So 7 diminished, or leading tone diminished chord, 2-1 substitution. So you can just call it, I guess, diminished 7th to 1. So let's take a look at this and how this works out. Okay, so this time we're actually replacing the 5 chord, because like I said, that you could replace G major with B diminished. And B diminished is actually that 7, that funny looking symbol you saw earlier, the 7 in the key of C. So we're actually taking out this 5 chord, just like we replaced the 4 chord before with 2, we're replacing 5 with diminished 7. So let me show you what this is going to look like. All I got to do actually is just move it to B, not C, B. There we go. There we go. So now instead of 1 4 5 1, you have 1 4 7 and then back to 1. So that 7 diminished chord actually creates a different flavor, a much different flavor than say 1 4 5, so it's 1 4 7 diminished. It really creates a crunchy type of sound when you're playing it. So like I said, the whole point, I think, to chord substitutions is really to change up the harmony, which changes the overall kind of background sound to the music. Okay, next we're going to talk about the tonic substitution. So now we're actually going to be replacing one of the other chords. As you may be able to guess, first time we replaced the 4 chord, second time we replaced the 5 chord with that 7 that I didn't change back yet. But this time we are actually going to be replacing the 1 to create a different kind of progression here. And this is called a tonic substitution, and that's because that 1 chord, or the first note of the scale, is known as the tonic. So we're actually replacing the tonic chord with another chord, and we commonly do that with a 6 chord. So let me write this out. Okay, so like I said, we're replacing the tonic, so let's erase that 1 there, and we're replacing it with a 6 chord. So how do we figure out what that is, right? Well, we have the first note of the scale. You just count up 1 2 3 4 5 6. You build a chord on that note, and hey, that's an A minor chord. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move it to A. So now we have 6 4 5 1. And actually, you can actually use a combination of these chord substitutions to. Okay, so we've replaced the 1 chord with a 6 chord. And I did that again. 1 chord with a 6 chord. So what kind of sound difference do you expect that to make, right? So if we had a 1 chord before, which was major, well, this time it's going to start with a minor chord, so it's going to start a little more sad. So you have like 6 4 5 1, right? It has a much different sound than 1 4 5 1. Now if you notice that I'm playing it different on the piano than what we have on the paper, that's because I'm playing the chords in inversions to create what we call voice leading. But that's not what this lesson is about, so I wouldn't really worry about it, since I think it's easier to visualize these in a root position. But this one really creates a different sound, doesn't it? I actually really like it. Hey, let's mix some up. So remember that before we had some different types. We had the 2-5 substitution. So let's add that in there along with the tonic substitution. So now I'm going to go from A minor, and then instead of F major next, I'm actually going to play D minor instead. And then the 5 1. So I had a little bit of a different sound, right? So that was 4 5 1, and this is. 2 5 1. So the difference in sound between those and why you might choose one or the other is that the 6 2 5 1 begins with 2 minor chords, whereas the other one had a major in there. You know, it has a little bit of a different sound. So it all depends on what kind of mood that you're going for. Jazz uses these a lot, so it's really, really important if you're looking to learn more about jazz harmony, or you are looking to learn even more about music theory. Speaking of jazz, let's talk about the tritone substitution. Okay, the tritone substitution is probably the hardest to understand, and that's because it kind of breaks the rules of common tones a little bit because you alter the tones. You'll see what I mean here in a second. So what a tritone substitution is you're taking the 5 chord. So we're taking this one right here, this one, and we are replacing that with a tritone chord that is a major tritone chord, or a major chord built on the tritone of G. And you may be like, what? What did you say? Oh, it says error saving. You may be thinking, what did you say? What does that mean? Well, what a tritone is that you go up to the 5th note of the scale, 3, 4, 5, and then you subtract one half step or a semitone to create what we call a diminished 5th, or it's called a tritone, and it has a very dissonant, cringy kind of sound. But this time what we're doing, because we're doing it on the 5 chord, we're actually going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from G, the note built from the 5 chord, and then you're going to flat it 1 to create a D flat there instead of a D, and that creates a tritone. Next, what you have to do is take that tritone and build a major chord on it, just like that. So what we have now, why is it doing that? Tons of computer stuff today. All right, hold on. So what we have now is, instead of the 5 chord, we have this D flat, or instead of the G chord, we have a D flat major chord. So let me write that out. So now we have 1, we're going up to the 4th chord. You got, instead of 5, we actually have now our tritone substitution. So I'm just going to write tritone sub. So now we have our tritone substitution. So 1, 4, tritone sub, back to 1. Kind of strange, huh? So we're replacing the 5 chord with a chord that's built on its tritone. Now, this makes a lot of sense. Now, you may be thinking, well, there's no common tones, really. I mean, there is a D in there that does have in common. And if you, by the way, this also works for 7th chords. So if you make these, like, so C7, you can replace with A minor 7. So if you just tack on 1 extra note up above, it still works for all of these substitutions. But anyway, this D flat chord doesn't really have much in common with the G major chord, G, B, and D. It does have kind of a D flat in there, but the notes are a little bit different this time. So it makes a lot of sense, though, to do a 1. We're going to combine a couple of these substitutions now. We're going to do a 2-5 sub, except this time we're going to go 2 to the tritone sub and back to 1. And actually what this creates is a D minor chord right here. And I'm going to show you what this does. So you have C major. And by the way, whenever you're doing voice leading, which I mentioned earlier, the idea is when you move from chord to chord, you want to move in as little movement as possible. Usually by step or half step, like that. So this time we have a 1, a 2, then we have that tritone sub back to 1, and hey, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? That's because we're moving this chord. The next chord, D minor, you just move all 3 notes up 1, so they're all very close together. When you move to this tritone sub, you can actually keep the F where it is, and just move the D to the D flat, A to A flat, like that, and back to 1. So you have what we call a nice chromatic motion between the chords. So like I said, this one's very, very common in jazz. Probably a little bit harder to understand than the others, but so long as you just generally understand the concept that you can replace another chord, 2 chords with each other, 1 chord with another chord, if they have 2 common tones, that's the most important thing to get. Okay, so I have another community challenge for you. So if you're watching the recording of this, I want you to practice this or look for this in your music, and then let me know in the comments. So do you have any chord substitutions in the pieces you are learning? So you want to list the piece as well as the substitution you think is happening in that piece and leave it in the comments. This will really help you take the knowledge we talked about today and really extend upon it and really start putting it into practice. So I'd really like to know what you think in the comments. So understanding chord substitutions is really important if you want to learn more about music theory, you want to get into jazz piano or something like that. If you want to learn more about chord progressions and about how chords are built, check out the lesson I'm going to post somewhere around here in the annotations for you to click on. And also a link in the description for you for some good continued learning here on YouTube. And if you want to take things to that next level, remember to check out the courses over on my website. So thanks everybody for coming out today. This has been Tim from Lessons on the Web, and I'll check you out for the next lesson. Thank you so much.